Let me ask you something that might sting a little. You walk out to your garden on a hot July morning, coffee in hand, and you look at your cucumber vines. Lots of leaves. Beautiful, lush, dark green leaves. But where are the cucumbers? Maybe you have a few, small ones, twisted and bitter. Then you glance over your neighbor's fence, and there it is, a wall of fat, crisp cucumbers, hanging so heavy the vines are bending under the weight. Same neighborhood, same summer heat, same rainfall. So what is going wrong in your garden? Here is the truth that most gardening videos will never tell you straight. It is not your seeds. It is not your soil type. It is not even the weather. The real problem is hiding inside the fertilizer routine you have been following, and it is silently working against you every single season. What you pour into that soil, and just as importantly, when you pour it and how much, is the difference between a vine full of fruit and a vine full of nothing but leaves. In this video, I am going to walk you through every critical feeding mistake that is costing you your harvest. And I am going to give you the exact, simple fixes, using things you probably already have sitting in your kitchen or backyard right now. By the time we are done, you will have a complete, proven feeding plan to double or even triple your cucumber yield this season. Before we dive in, tell me down in the comments, are you growing cucumbers to slice fresh into salads, or are you a serious pickling fan? I want to hear from you. Now let us get into it. Welcome back, and if this is your first time here, welcome to Martha's Backyard Farm, the place where we grow real food, share real results, and cut through all the gardening noise, so you can actually enjoy your harvest. If you have not subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that button right now, because we are about to cover some information that most gardeners spend years figuring out the hard way, and I do not want you to miss a single video. Now, let us talk about the mistake that is destroying more cucumber harvests across America than anything else. I call it the nitrogen trap, and chances are good that you have fallen right into it. Here is how it happens. You head to your local garden center. You grab a bag of general-purpose fertilizer. You follow the instructions on the label, and you pour it onto your cucumber bed week after week. The vines explode with growth. The leaves are huge and dark green and absolutely stunning. You think you are doing everything right, but then the weeks go by, and you start to notice something deeply frustrating. There are no cucumbers, maybe a few tiny ones that never seem to develop. What went wrong? The answer is nitrogen. Nitrogen is the nutrient responsible for pushing leaf and stem growth, and cucumbers love it in the early stages of life. But here is what the label on that fertilizer bag never tells you. The moment your cucumber plant starts forming flower buds, it needs to shift its energy completely away from growing leaves and toward producing fruit. If you keep flooding it with high nitrogen at that critical moment, the plant literally drops its flowers and goes right back to making more vines. You end up with a beautiful green jungle and an empty dinner plate. Think of it like a guy who only ever trains his arms at the gym and completely skips leg day. He looks impressive from the waist up, but he has no foundation to actually perform. That is your over-fertilized cucumber plant. Here is the practical fix. In the early weeks of growth, a balanced fertilizer with an NPK ratio of the 10th of October 2010 works well to build strong vines and healthy leaves. But the moment you spot those first tiny yellow flower buds forming on the vine, you need to switch immediately to a formula closer to the 10th of May 2010. That lower nitrogen number combined with higher phosphorus and potassium is what tells the plant to stop building and start producing. That one simple switch can completely transform your harvest. Now here is another mistake I see constantly, and it comes from a very good place. People want to go natural. They want to skip the synthetic stuff and feed their cucumbers with fresh animal manure from a local farm or a neighbor with chickens. That instinct is right, but the execution is dangerously wrong. Fresh manure, whether it comes from chickens, cows, or horses, is what experienced gardeners call chemically hot. That does not mean it feels warm to the touch. It means it is loaded with concentrated ammonia and uncomposted urea that have not had time to break down into a safe, plant-friendly form. When that raw material hits the soil around your cucumber roots, it does not feed the plant. It burns it. Within days, you will see yellowing, wilting, and a plant that looks like it has been scorched from the inside out. To use manure safely, it must be fully aged and composted for a minimum of 6 to 12 months. When it is truly ready, it should look and smell like rich, dark forest soil, not like a barn. If there is still an odor of animal waste, it is not ready, and your garden will pay the price for your impatience. So let us talk about the nutrient that actually builds the underground foundation your cucumbers desperately need. That nutrient is phosphorus. While nitrogen handles the green growth above the soil, phosphorus is the architect working silently below the surface. It drives root development, pushing those roots deeper and wider into the earth, so the plant can access moisture even during the driest weeks of summer. And here is why that matters more than most people realize. Cucumbers are more than 90% water. Every fat, juicy cucumber hanging from your vine is essentially a vessel of water held together by plant structure. If the roots are shallow and weak, the plant simply cannot pull up enough moisture to fill out that fruit, no matter how much you water from the top. Phosphorus is also the specific trigger that tells the plant it is time to form flowers. A great way to deliver it right from the start is to mix a generous handful of bone meal directly into the planting hole before you ever put a seed or seedling in the ground. By the time the plant is large enough to flower, that slow-release phosphorus will already be waiting in the root zone, ready to go to work. Now that we have covered the foundation of feeding, roots, phosphorus, and avoiding those early fatal mistakes, I want to talk about the nutrient that determines whether the cucumbers you actually grow are worth eating. We are talking about potassium, and this one is personal to me because I spent 2 full seasons wondering why my cucumbers looked fine on the vine, but came out soft, misshapen, and rotting before I could even get them to the kitchen. The answer was potassium deficiency, and once I fixed it, everything changed. Potassium is essentially the quality control manager of your entire cucumber plant. It regulates how the plant moves water in and out of its cells, and it is directly responsible for building strong, firm cell walls inside every single fruit. When potassium levels are low, cucumbers grow with weak internal structure. They come out rubbery, oddly shaped, or they start rotting right on the vine before they are anywhere near ripe. Potassium also acts like an immune system for your plants, helping them push through heat waves and fight off disease pressure during the hardest weeks of summer. Here is the best part. One of the most powerful natural sources of potassium is something most of us throw in the trash every single morning: banana peels. Instead of tossing them out, chop them up and bury them in a shallow ring around the base of your cucumber plants. Or, even better, make yourself a batch of banana peel tea. Drop several peels into a bucket of water and let them soak for 3 full days. When you pull them out, that dark brown liquid left behind is loaded with bioavailable potassium your plants can absorb almost immediately. Pour it right onto the soil at the base of the vine, and your cucumbers will reward you with a crunch so satisfying you will hear it from across the kitchen. Now I want to address something that confuses a lot of gardeners, and that is the issue of bitter cucumbers. You grow a beautiful fruit, you bring it inside, you take that first big bite, and it tastes like you just chewed on a piece of bark. That bitterness has a name. It is a compound called cucurbitacin, and according to Oregon State University Extension, it is produced naturally by the plant as a stress response. Here is what most people do not know. Cucurbitacin is not spread evenly through the fruit. It concentrates specifically at the stem end of the cucumber and in the skin, particularly in that pale green layer just beneath the peel. The interior flesh is almost always much milder. So if you are dealing with a slightly bitter harvest, try peeling your cucumbers from the blossom end downward toward the stem, never the other way around. And always cut off about 2 inches from the stem end before you slice. That one simple habit removes the most concentrated bitter zone before it ever touches the rest of the fruit. To fight cucurbitacin at the root level, your plant needs a steady supply of calcium. Calcium holds the plant cells together during rapid growth, and without it, the plant goes into stress mode and ramps up cucurbitacin production as a defense. Crushed eggshells are a wonderful organic calcium source, but here is the critical detail that most gardening advice gets completely wrong. Tossing whole or roughly broken eggshells on top of your soil does almost nothing for your plants this season. Large shell pieces take years to fully break down. You need to grind those shells into a fine powder using a blender or a coffee grinder, and then mix that powder directly into the soil around your plants. In that powdered form, the calcium becomes available to the roots within weeks, not years. Moving right along, because there is one more secret I want to share before we get to the advanced techniques, and this one tends to surprise people every single time. Have you ever considered feeding your cucumber plants baker's yeast? I know that sounds unusual, but stay with me on this one. Yeast is packed with B vitamins, natural plant hormones, and trace minerals. More importantly, when you introduce a yeast solution into your soil, it acts as a powerful stimulant for the beneficial microbial life already living in the ground beneath your feet. It wakes those microbes up and sends them into overdrive, breaking down organic matter and releasing nutrients at a much faster rate than they normally would. The recipe is straightforward. Take 1 ounce of fresh baker's yeast and dissolve it in a cup of warm water along with 2 tablespoons of sugar. Let that mixture sit in a warm spot for about 2 hours until it becomes bubbly and active. Then pour that frothy cup into 2.5 gallons of water and use it to water your cucumbers once every 2 weeks. The results: thicker stems, faster vine spread, and noticeably more fruit will speak for themselves. And before we move on, let me give you one more quick diagnostic tool that every serious cucumber grower needs to know. Walk out to your garden right now and look at the older leaves on your vines, the ones lower on the plant. If you see yellowing between the leaf veins while the veins themselves stay dark green, that is a textbook sign of magnesium deficiency. Magnesium sits at the very center of every chlorophyll molecule, which means without it, your plant cannot properly capture sunlight and cannot produce the energy it needs to grow and fruit. The fastest fix available to you is Epsom salt, which is not actually a table salt at all, but a naturally occurring mineral compound made of magnesium and sulfate. Dissolve 1 tablespoon of Epsom salt into 1 gallon of water and put that solution in a spray bottle. Mist it directly onto the leaves early in the morning, never during the midday heat when water droplets on leaves can act like tiny magnifying glasses and cause burn damage. The plant absorbs magnesium directly through the leaf surface, and you will often see those yellow leaves begin greening up within just a few days. Let us keep moving, because we still have some seriously powerful tools to cover, and I promise you, by the time we get to the end of this section, you will have at least one technique that most gardeners in your neighborhood have never even heard of. But first, let me tell you about something that might be sitting in your backyard fire pit right now. Completely overlooked, completely free, and absolutely loaded with the minerals your cucumber plants are craving during heavy fruit production. I am talking about wood ash. Hardwood ash from a clean fire pit or a wood-burning stove is naturally rich in potassium, calcium, and magnesium, which, as we have already established, are exactly the nutrients cucumbers need most during the fruiting stage. Sounds perfect, right? And it can be, but only if you use it with real discipline. Wood ash is highly alkaline, which means it raises the pH of your soil quickly. Cucumbers need a soil pH between 6 and 7 to absorb nutrients properly. Push that pH too high, and you create what is called nutrient lockout, where minerals are physically present in the soil but completely unavailable to the roots, no matter how much you fertilize. The plant starves while surrounded by food. So the rule with wood ash is simple. Take 1 small handful, sift out any unburned chunks, and sprinkle it in a wide ring around the base of the plant. Then water it in well. Do this no more than twice per growing season. And never, under any circumstances, use ash from charcoal briquettes, treated lumber, or trash burns. Only clean, natural hardwood ash belongs anywhere near your vegetable garden. Now I want to bust a myth that is all over social media, and it is one that I see causing real damage in home gardens every single year. People are being told to dump their used coffee grounds directly onto their cucumber beds as a nitrogen boost. I understand the appeal. It feels natural, it feels resourceful, and coffee grounds do contain organic matter. But here is what actually happens when you pile wet coffee grounds against the base of your cucumber plants. They compact into a dense, nearly waterproof crust on top of the soil. That crust blocks oxygen and water from reaching the roots below. Even worse, as that thick, wet layer begins to break down, it creates the perfect, warm, and humid environment for fungal diseases to take hold right at the base of your stem, which is the most vulnerable part of the entire plant. Cucumbers are highly susceptible to stem rot, and inviting that kind of moisture and fungal pressure directly against the crown of the plant is a serious mistake. The correct way to use coffee grounds is to add them to your compost bin first. Let the earthworms and bacteria do their work over several months, and then apply that finished compost to your garden. In that fully broken down form, it is safe, beneficial, and genuinely useful. Moving forward to one of my all-time favorite organic feeding strategies, and this one requires a little patience and a strong stomach. I am talking about homemade weed teas, specifically stinging nettle tea and comfrey tea, used together as a two-stage professional feeding system. Stinging nettle, that annoying plant that burns your skin when you brush against it, is actually one of the most mineral-dense plants in nature. It is packed with readily absorbable nitrogen, iron, calcium, and potassium. To make the tea, put on thick gloves, gather a large bundle of fresh nettle leaves, stuff them into a 5-gallon bucket, fill it with water, and cover it loosely. Then let it ferment for 2 full weeks. Fair warning, the smell that develops is genuinely horrible, somewhere between a swamp and a compost heap on the hottest day of summer. But that smell is your signal that fermentation is working perfectly and that the nutrients are being released into the liquid. Once the bubbling stops and the water turns dark, strain out the plant material and dilute the concentrate at a ratio of 1 part tea to 10 parts clean water. Use this to feed your young cucumber plants every 10 days through the early growth stage. It builds strong, dark green foliage and establishes vigorous vines that are ready to support a heavy crop. Then, the moment you see those first yellow flowers opening on the vine, you make a clean and deliberate switch. You stop the nettle tea completely and move to comfrey tea, prepared the same way, but using comfrey leaves instead. Comfrey has deep tap roots that pull phosphorus and potassium up from deep in the subsoil, nutrients that are well beyond the reach of your cucumber's shallow root system. Those are exactly the minerals needed for flower development and fruit fill. This two-stage system, nettle tea for growth, comfrey tea for fruiting, gives your cucumbers a completely organic, perfectly timed nutritional program that mirrors what commercial growers spend significant money trying to replicate. Now here is the technique I promised you earlier, the one that genuinely separates experienced growers from everyone else. And I am genuinely excited to share this because it changed the way I think about soil health entirely. Most gardeners focus on what they add on top of the soil, but the real action, the game-changing productivity, happens in the invisible world beneath the surface. I am talking about mycorrhizal fungi, a network of beneficial fungal threads that form a living partnership with your cucumber roots. These microscopic filaments extend outward from the root system in every direction, effectively multiplying the surface area available for nutrient and water absorption by many times over. Research has shown that in healthy, biologically active soil, these fungi can supply plants with up to 80% of their nitrogen needs and up to 90% of their phosphorus needs, drawing those minerals from areas of the soil that plant roots could never physically reach on their own. For cucumber growers, this is enormous, because as we established earlier, cucumbers are thirsty, heavy-feeding plants that drain the soil fast. A robust mycorrhizal network essentially gives your plant a second, invisible root system working around the clock. The practical application could not be simpler. Look for a product labeled mycorrhizal inoculant at your local Home Depot, Lowe's, or on Amazon. It comes as a dry powder or granules. When you are planting your cucumber seeds or seedlings, Just dust a small amount directly into the planting hole before you put the plant in. That single step activates a biological partnership that will quietly and powerfully feed your cucumbers all season long. No expensive chemicals required. We have covered a lot of ground on what to feed your cucumbers, and now I want to share 2 more strategies that most home gardeners completely overlook. These are not about fertilizer at all. They are about how you train your plant and what you grow alongside it, and together, they can push your yield higher than any single nutrient ever could on its own. Let us start with pruning and vine training, because this is where I see enormous wasted potential in backyard gardens all across the country. When a cucumber vine is left to sprawl freely, it sends energy in every direction at once, into dozens of side shoots, into lower leaves that never see sunlight, and into root zones that are already exhausted from early season growth. The plant is busy, but it is not productive. The fix starts at the very base of the plant. In the first few weeks of growth, pinch off every side shoot emerging from the lowest 5 to 7 nodes on the main stem. Those lower shoots will never produce quality fruit because they sit too close to the soil, receive too little light, and draw energy away from the upper vine where the real production happens. Once you clear that lower section, train the main stem up a trellis to a height of about 5 to 6 feet. Then pinch the growing tip. Research out of Penn State found that this umbrella trellis method, where the main stem is topped and the remaining lateral branches are allowed to drape downward on both sides, actually doubled both fruit count and total weight compared to standard vertical training. That is not a small improvement. That is a completely different harvest. And here is one more advanced trick that most gardeners never try. Once the lower portion of your vine has been harvested and the leaves there begin to yellow, mound fresh compost directly over that lower stem section and water it in well. That buried stem will respond by pushing out a new set of feeder roots, essentially giving your plant a second wind of nutrient and water absorption deep into the season. Now let us talk about the garden strategy that costs almost nothing and can increase your cucumber yield by up to 30% without adding a single fertilizer application. Companion planting. The plants growing around your cucumbers have a far greater influence on your harvest than most people realize. Nasturtiums planted close to your cucumber bed act as a living trap crop, drawing aphids away from your vines and onto themselves, where the damage is far easier to manage. Marigolds planted along the border attract beneficial insects that prey on the pests most likely to damage your crop. Dill, when allowed to flower, pulls in parasitic wasps that specifically target cucumber beetles, which are one of the most destructive threats a cucumber garden faces because they carry bacterial wilt, a disease that can kill a healthy plant within days of infection. And borage, a plant many gardeners have never tried, is a remarkable addition because its deep tap roots mine minerals from layers of soil well below where cucumber roots can reach, effectively bringing those nutrients up to the surface where they become available to your plants. On the other side of the equation, keep your cucumbers well away from sage, fennel, potatoes, and any other member of the cucurbit family like squash or melons. These plants either release compounds that suppress cucumber growth or share the same pest and disease pressures, concentrating problems rather than distributing them. Now let me pull everything together into a clear, season-long master feeding plan so you know exactly what to do from the day you plant to the day you harvest. When you first put your seeds or seedlings in the ground, your job is to build the foundation. Mix aged compost and a handful of bone meal into the planting hole, dust in your mycorrhizal inoculant, and let the roots establish without the pressure of heavy liquid feeding. Once your vine has developed 3 to 4 true leaves and is growing vigorously, introduce diluted nettle tea every 10 days to support strong stem and leaf development. Watch your plant closely, every single day, because the moment those first yellow flower buds appear, everything changes. Stop the nettle tea immediately. Switch your granular fertilizer from the 10th of October 2010 down to the 10th of May 2010, and begin your comfrey tea applications on a 10 to 14-day rotation. Keep your soil consistently moist, like a wrung-out sponge throughout the entire fruiting period. Apply your banana peel tea and powdered eggshell calcium to prevent bitterness and blossom end rot, and always water and fertilize in the early morning when the plant is cool, rested, and ready to absorb. So there you have it. The complete truth about growing field cucumbers that are heavy, crisp, sweet, and absolutely worth all the effort you put into your garden. The single most important thing I want you to take away from everything we covered today is this: more fertilizer does not mean more cucumbers. What matters is the right nutrient, delivered at the right time, in the right form, to a plant that has the roots, the structure, and the biological support it needs to actually use it. Get those fundamentals right, and your vines will do the rest. If this video gave you even one idea you had not tried before, do me a favor and hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps this channel reach more gardeners who need this information. Subscribe to Martha's Backyard Farm so you never miss what we are growing and sharing next. And I would love to hear from you down in the comments. What is the one technique from today that you are most excited to try in your garden this season? Let us get a great conversation going, and I will see you in the next one. Happy growing!